Hey, it's Josh Vergara from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And we're back with another Hangout style versus for you guys. This time pitting the LG G5 versus the LG V10. Now, we did hear your guys' feedback, and we're not necessarily using Hangouts here, but we are on a call. I am, at least, with Lan Wen, who's over there. You can probably see a shot of him right now. And the reason why we're doing this for the LG G5 versus the V10 is because, if you guys remember, I did not do any reviews or any content really on the LG V10. So even though I got this V10 in my hands right now, I wanted to make sure that we got a comprehensive and at least conversational versus down with one of the people that spent a lot of time with this phone, and that's of course Lan over there. How's it going, Lan?
It's going pretty well.
So you spent a lot of time with the V10, and I suppose we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. The first thing I'll say is if you want to see the full reviews for both of these, Lan actually did the full reviews for the V10 and the G5, so make sure you head over to the Android Authority page and our YouTube channel to see those full reviews if you need that information. But we'll start off. I obviously have the G5 here as well, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Lan, what can you tell me about what do you think about the V10, especially in terms of, let's start off with a little bit of design. How did it look and feel?
It's very different from any LG device that we've seen in the past, even very different from the G5 itself. It's comprised of a couple different materials. It's made of stainless steel along the rails. So on the left and right sides, you have the stainless steel rails, and it's 316L stainless steel if you want to get specific. So it's really sturdy, and it's also made of a Duraskin or a DuraGuard material, which is a sort of a high quality silicone, and it gives it a lot of grip. But these two materials combined basically make this phone military grade resistant against drops. So if you're a klutz and you happen to drop your phone a lot, this phone is capable of taking that sort of punishment. Or if you just live sort of a rough and tumble lifestyle, this phone is going to live up to that.
The G5 obviously is made of a metal design. Now, of course, metal is a little bit controversial when it comes to how it was, let's say, anodized or painted and whatnot. So, you know, you can take what you will on that. But really, when it comes to its overall, let's say, aesthetic, you still have the power button on the back. That's also the fingerprint reader, which the V10 also had. But I don't know, I miss those buttons on the back, honestly. And this overall design, it was just really very iconic for LG, and I honestly kind of really miss it. The other thing too is that you have the modular design on the G5, obviously, which means that you can take the bottom portion off and be able to take out the battery and put it into other bits and pieces that will then add to the function of the phone. The V10 doesn't have that, but the backing is removable, if I remember. Yep, there it is, as I just removed it right there. So again, a bit of a classical look for the LG V10, and especially with this nice textured backing, it's not going to slip about, which actually I think is, did you have any problems with handling on this phone? Because it's kind of big.
It's not necessarily bulky, but it is a wide and tall phone. So even if you're coming from like a Galaxy Note 5 or a Nexus 6P, it still feels even bigger than those phones a little bit. So, and if you're coming from something like a 5-inch phone, you're definitely going to feel the difference with this. It's definitely not exactly what I would call a one-handed phone.
So obviously the G5 is the newer of the two devices. We're technically taking a look at what you could consider two of LG's best phones. So I think it was very worthy of us to take a look at these because personally, if the V10 comes out with a successor, I would hope it to be a little bit smaller, and then I would probably really go for it. But as far as other features go, we can get into it. The Snapdragon 808 for the V10 and obviously the Snapdragon 820 for the G5. I haven't really seen any big differences between these two in terms of performance. I mean, for the most part, it's just a pretty standard but also very reliable and speedy performance aspect for both of these.
Yeah, the V10 it's still a pretty fast phone, even though it's rocking, you know, Snapdragon 808, which is obviously at this point it's a little bit more outdated. If you're looking at benchmarks and raw numbers and that stuff, it's not going to really hold up to the G5. But in terms of just regular everyday use, it still feels very fast. It plays games well, it multitasks, it opens apps, all the stuff that you normally want to do on your smartphone. It still does all that stuff perfectly fine. So I never had any issues with it, and it's still just a really good phone in terms of, you know, just raw performance.
Ultimately going to come down to what your software is like, and I personally have made some comments in the past that the LG UX might be a little too bloated, I suppose, a few too many features that are not that useful. The screens, we have IPS screens, as LG is usually doing in their flagship devices. So you have IPS screens both at Quad HD resolution, but it's really in this second screen. Now I've used it a little bit, And Lon, you obviously have much more to say about it.
The second screen on the V10 is pretty unique. It's what makes this phone a little bit different. And it's also part of the reason why the phone is as large as it is, because the main screen is a 5.7-inch panel. But when you count the secondary screen, it actually makes it pretty close to 6 inches. So that's part of the reason why the phone is as big as it is. But the secondary screen does have some functionality built into it. You can toggle on Wi-Fi or turn on the flash, just various little functions like that. And you can also sort of use it as a multitasker of sorts, and you can quickly switch between applications. So that's really cool as well. And it also will show you your notifications in that screen. So instead of the banner notifications popping up on your main display, it actually only shows up on the secondary screen. So it saves you some screen real estate, which is one of the things that I actually thought was really cool about that secondary screen.
Smaller of the two devices, so its battery is also a bit smaller as well. Not by too much, however. You get 2800 milliamp hours in this unit, and it, for the most part, does a pretty good job. It's not going to be a high performer when you compare it to certain phones that can go for even 2 days if you're able to do it with a little bit of frugal usage. But the V10, because it is larger, it does have a 3000 milliamp hour battery, which these days is kind of the standard. What was your battery life like on the phone, even with the second screen?
Battery life is actually pretty good. It gets through a full day really easily, no matter what it was that I was doing, whether I was gaming a lot or taking a lot of pictures with the camera, or just, checking social media. Whatever it is that I did, it made it through the full day pretty easily, but that was really as far as it went. But I never had to struggle to get through that full day, which was the good thing about the battery life. As with all LG phones, it is removable, so you can swap it out for a fresh one if you like to carry spare batteries, and it also has fast charging, so you can easily top it up or fill it up whenever you need to.
Well, on the G5, it is satisfactory, but the best way for me to put it is that it's not an above average performer. Not that above average, I should say. But the main reason why the battery being removable on the G5 is so important is because you have those modules. And the two of us have already had our experiences with various modules, the camera grip, the Cam Plus rather it's called, and the Bang & Olufsen DAC that's supposed to connect to the bottom as well. Ultimately, if you have seen any of our Versus videos involving the G5 recently, we do say that the modules are a great idea. It does make the G5 very different, but as of yet, it doesn't really prove itself as a killer app or a killer feature for the G5. That said, you could still remove the battery. It might be a little bit difficult to snap it off and then put a new one in there, but at least you still have that option. So if you do need to get extra power, you can definitely do so with both of these phones. Which brings us to the cameras. We did mention the Cam Plus earlier, and it is an interesting grip and also extra battery for the G5, so that is an added benefit. But we're taking a look at two duo cameras, which I think is interesting because on the V10, and this is something that I didn't necessarily realize until we had a lot of our content already out there, the duo camera setup that you see on the G5 was technically started on the front of the V10, right, Lon?
Yeah, so with the V10, you have a dual camera setup as well, just like the G5, but on the V10, it is on the front. So they focused more on front-facing videos and selfies and things of that nature. They're both 5 megapixels, and one is a standard angle and the other is a wide angle. So if you want to take really wide angle selfies where you can easily fit, a lot of your friends and family, or just a bigger chunk of the scenery in the background, you can do that with the front-facing camera on the G5, and you can easily switch between them within the software. And it's actually a really fun front-facing shooter. So if you love taking selfies, you love taking front-facing videos, things of that nature, or just vlogging, this is a really great camera for that because you can easily fit yourself into the frame so well because of that wide-angle lens.
You do get the same premise with the rear cameras on the G5. You still get an 8 megapixel front-facing shooter, but if you really want to get some fun selfies, or if in general you just want to have a lot of fun shooting with the G5, that wide angle is incredibly fun to use. It really, at some cases, you're able to turn on the wide angle and just turn the phone around like this, and then you'll easily get yourself in the shot because it's such a wide angle lens. But I think the V10 really intrigued me over the last number of days that I've been using it, that its video mode is actually really robust, and it's not a mode that that you get in the G5. You can actually have a manual video mode, which for us YouTubers is incredibly important. And we did take a bunch of photos with these two phones just to see what the general quality was like. And for the most part, what we found is that really these two kind of are a bit of a toss-up. It really isn't the apps and the manual controls that you get some differences, maybe skewing more towards the V10. But in the case of picture quality, for the most part, they're really kind of solid. LG's done a really great job with their cameras in recent flagships, and ultimately, when you have these two phones with pretty warm coloration, what we really just found was that the G5 had more contrast, but if you're looking at detail in general, then really the two phones have pretty much the same sensor and very similar post-processing. So you can kind of take your pick whether or not you want that wide angle for the front of the phone or you want it on the back of the phone on the G5, which might prove to be a little bit more useful for some people. Depends on who you are. You could have a lot of fun with both of these cameras. Alright, so software is not going to be that difficult to talk about when it comes to these two phones because after all, both of them are LG. Now, the thing with the V10 is that you have, well, that second screen up top, which does add some functionality, but really in general, this is the LG UX. Now, the main thing we could probably talk about is the G5, because on the V10, you have what looks like the usual LG suspects. You have the app drawer, which thankfully stayed in the G5 after an update, and you have all the colorful icons and maybe just a few extra features that may or may not be ultimately useful. With the V10, did you happen to use any of the multi-window or any of the, let's say, what was the Q-Slide? There it is, the Q-Slide applications I just found here. Were you able to use any of those, or did those remain like maybe not so useful features?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of the features that LG implements into their software is typically for me, I don't find it to be all that useful. So stuff like Smart Bulletin and Q-Slide and the dual window functionality, I don't really use any of those features. There may be other people out there that like those features. I personally am not a fan of it, and I think some of those features sort of make the software feel a little bit bloaty. And then there's also, you know, a lot of other applications, a lot of LG apps in there as well that sort of add a little bit more to the software than I would like. So I'm not a huge fan of LG skin on the V10, but maybe other people out there feel a little bit differently. But for me, it's just not my cup of tea in terms of the way that it looks and the way that it functions.
I do think that makes a case for the second screen, honestly, because with the G5 having kind of made a bit of a controversial splash not having the app drawer out of the box, now that it's back, it feels a lot like the V10, only now it's missing a couple of other features like dual window, and the Q-Slide is really hidden somewhere on the side, very deep inside of the settings. So that makes the LG UX of the G5 actually feel like it took a step back, which is a little bit disconcerting, honestly. And really, if the next LG phone is going to have the second screen on it, then that might actually be the killer app when it comes to the software. And really you have the same features when it comes to security, the fingerprint readers on the back, and even knock code. So if you want to be able to unlock your device in a more customizable way even, you can use the knock code for that. Ultimately though, I do think that these two phones represent some of the best ideas that LG has had, especially when you take into consideration the modularity of the G5 and just some of the sheer features of the V10, especially when you consider those cameras. Well, for the most part, that's us having our conversation on this versus between the LG G5 and the LG V10. These are two of the best phones that have come out from LG. And on the one hand, you have the G5, which is the current flagship that does a great job. It's a solid phone and it has a couple of very unique features, especially that dual camera setup and the modularity. But the V10 was almost like a perfecting, I think, of LG's design language and also some of their features. LG actually does have some great cameras in their phones, and they kind of went for broke on the LG V10. So hopefully any upcoming V series phones will probably be very stellar. Lon, I want to thank you for helping me out on this versus, and as I said to all of you guys in our triple threat versus that you saw a while back, we are going to be having more videos like this just to give a more conversational tone to our versus videos. Lon, thank you again, and make sure you stay tuned to Android Authority for all of the best coverage from the two of us here in this video. You could see his reviews of both of these phones, and you can see some content from me on the LG G5 as well. I'm going to play around with the V10 a little bit more, but ultimately stick around and subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already, drop us some likes on this video so you can see that we will continue to have this format for especially versus videos and maybe conversations about future phones as well. I think that should pretty much do it. Yeah, stick around to Android Authority because, Lon, we are your source for all things
Android.